The Galtrax Dominion had cataloged thousands of species across the galaxy, dissected their strengths, and exploited every flaw. Predators by biology and tradition, their society revered domination through direct conquest. Victory wasn't just expected, it was ceremonial. The moment Earth was discovered, rich with biomass and seemingly fractured by internal conflict, it was categorized as a class for Hunt World. Not a threat, not even a challenge. A rite of passage. Orbiting Earth, their warships floated like obsidian sharks. Galtrax tacticians pored over intercepted human communications, observing what they believed were signs of weakness. Chaotic politics, emotional outbursts, endless internal strife. No centralized global command, fragmented militaries, inconsistent technologies. They saw division and presumed vulnerability. To them, it was laughable, primitive, predictable. A tribunal of elders debated the terms. No orbital bombardments. No mass destruction. This was to be a proving ground for the next generation of warriors. Younglings would descend in squads, hunting isolated populations for sport. The purpose wasn't subjugation, it was entertainment, a lesson in survival and assertion of dominance. The Dominion had done this countless times. The results were always the same. High above Earth, in the command chamber of the lead vessel, Commander Varexi watched the feed dispassionately. He'd heard whispers, years ago, from the outposts beyond the Veil, the places where Dominion scouts had vanished without explanation. Those who returned spoke of feral bipeds that set traps, ambushed from shadows, and used desperation like a weapon. Most of those reports were dismissed as cowards' tales. Varexi hadn't believed them either, until now. There was something different in the data, something unsettling. But when he raised concerns, they were swatted away. Fear is not fitting for a leader, snapped a high-caste strategist. We hunt, they run. Varexi said nothing. Instead, he watched footage of a human riot. Smoke, fire, chaos. The others saw disunity. He saw coordination under stress. Improvisation. Fury. It disturbed him. The first insertion fleet detached from orbit. 10 dropships, sleek and armored, slipped through Earth's atmosphere, cloaked against rudimentary detection. They landed in forests, deserts, and urban ruins, scattering their warriors across biomes for maximum test variance. The Galtrax were eager, confident. Young hunters clicked their mandibles and hissed challenges, ready to earn their markings with blood. They stalked through neighborhoods and tree lines, thermal vision active, cloaking fields engaged. They expected screams, running prey, fear, but the cities were still, too still. Scouting formations entered abandoned buildings and encountered nothing but silence. Homes were empty, vehicles left mid-motion. It was as if humanity had vanished. Then the first squad disappeared. Initial theories blamed terrain anomalies. Then, 3 more teams went dark, simultaneously, on separate continents. Their tracking signals blinked out in synchronized bursts. A deep unease rippled through the command deck. One surviving hunter, bloodied and staggering, returned to his landing point alone. His armor was scorched. He spoke in clipped, panicked growls. Prey hunted back. It made no sense. Their kind had the advantage of stealth, strength, and technology. But something was wrong on Earth. The humans weren't fleeing. They were preparing. A week passed. Then 2. Reports streamed in, all disturbing. Dominion hunters fell into traps that used their own sensor frequencies against them. Squad leaders were lured by fake distress signals only to be ambushed. Unseen projectiles, simple but effective, pierced armor plating. Explosives crafted from primitive materials shredded landing zones. The Dominion's communications began to fragment. Human counterinterference scrambled long-range signals. The Galtrax had underestimated not only human resilience, but their ability to adapt on the fly. Improvised defense networks, local militias coordinating across continents, even hacked satellite feeds feeding real-time enemy movements to human forces. The predators had landed expecting prey. Instead, they encountered an enemy they couldn't categorize. Varexi stood silent as feeds blinked out one by one. He watched a youngling impaled on a sharpened steel beam, left in the open as a warning. The initial waves of Galtrax hunters met silence. They moved through forests, urban ruins, and coastlines with practiced grace, their armor glinting beneath shifting camo fields. No resistance, no civilians, no bodies, just empty streets, unplugged machines, abandoned weapons. At first, they believed this to be a sign of cowardice, prey scurrying into holes. The illusion held for exactly 42 hours. A squad vanished outside a mining outpost in the Pacific Northwest. Another disappeared in the ruins of an Eastern European city. The Dominion's operators, trained in countless planetary environments, left no signals, no beacons, no trails. They simply ceased. When recovery drones were sent, they returned partial footage, blurred flashes of movement, distorted audio, high-frequency screeches, and then black. Within 72 hours, casualty numbers reached what the Dominion would consider a Class II engagement. That was impossible. Earth had no global army, no unified command, no defense grid. But what Earth lacked in centralization, it compensated for with adaptation. Isolated militias, local veterans, rogue engineers, and even criminal syndicates began organizing in real time. Communications moved offline. Technology became analog. Encrypted networks linked fighters across time zones. By day 5, the Galtrax no longer advanced. They held positions, set patrols, and began digging in, an act previously unthinkable for hunters. Defensive behavior was for prey. They started encountering attacks in patternless intervals. Ambushes in daylight. Traps triggered by atmospheric pressure changes. Remote-controlled vehicles packed with explosives. Sniper fire from impossible angles. Drones hacked to transmit false friendly signals, drawing Galtrax into kill zones. Every time they adjusted tactics, humans adjusted faster. One Galtrax commander reviewed footage of a skirmish outside a collapsed metro system. His warriors had entered what appeared to be a communications relay center. The entire structure detonated minutes later. Investigators found fragments of melted circuitry, timed charges disguised as heating coils, and a severed Galtrax helmet with a human message carved into the visor. This is the trap. The Dominion tried deploying hunter beasts, semi-sentient bioforms bred to seek and consume. Most were eliminated before they reached targets. One was captured and turned into a guided bomb. It walked back to its own handlers before detonating. Psychological tactics intensified. Alien corpses were returned, mutilated, posed in twisted mockeries of Dominion honor poses. Recordings were spliced into Dominion frequencies, distorted human voices whispering in Galactic Basic, "We see you. We smell you. We know you." Panic infected the lower ranks. Warriors refused to separate into squads of less than 5. Some stopped sleeping. A few were executed for dereliction. One was found clawing at his own throat, convinced the air itself had turned hostile. Dominion tacticians attempted countermeasures. They began mapping zones of high resistance. But the maps changed daily. Human movements defied logic. Civilians would act like non-combatants one moment, then detonate traps or open fire the next. Children were used as bait. Old men fought with sharpened rebar and hunting rifles. Entire neighborhoods would disappear, then reappear filled with armed resistance. They didn't fight for territory. They fought to destroy confidence. In one transmission intercepted from an Earth-based resistance group, a human woman explained their doctrines simply. "We're not here to win. We're here to make you bleed for every inch you take." That was the moment the Dominion realized this wasn't a war in their terms. This was something else. A test of endurance. A game of psychological dismemberment. And they were losing. The turning point came when a Galtrax patrol found what looked like a makeshift trench in a rural farmland sector. Fresh footprints, signs of recent combat. The unit advanced cautiously. Heat signatures registered as human, just out of sight. Then silence. The trench was empty. Seconds later, the ground erupted. A hidden blast shattered the squad. 3 dead instantly. 2 maimed. As Dominion medics arrived, An alien technician picked up a faint signal from the trench's remains. A looped voice. Human. Calm. You think you're the hunters, but you're the loudest animals in the woods. That message was broadcast across 3 sectors. VA Core reviewed the incident from orbit. He paused the audio, played it again. Each time, it unsettled him more. Not because of what was said, but how it was said. No fear, no rage, just certainty, cold and quiet. In response, he issued a directive. Tactical regrouping, full-scale scan of all active battlefields, internal review of data consistency. But the system lagged. Software glitched. Sensors failed mid-sweep. Sabotage wasn't suspected, it was confirmed. Dominion systems were being hacked. From the ground. By a civilization considered too primitive to understand alien code. Within the next cycle, 5 more squads were lost in identical traps. Engineers concluded that humans had mapped their frequency spectrum. Worse, they were now manipulating it. The Dominion no longer called a hunt. Internal reports labeled it a containment failure. The hunters were being culled, not by superior firepower, but by something they'd never encountered before. A species that fought like it was already extinct with nothing to lose. By the 3rd week, the Galtrac's command structure showed cracks. What was once a finely tuned predatory machine began fracturing under pressure. Entire communication nodes had gone dark. Hunting parties no longer reported in. Internal records revealed that over 1/3 of the deployed warriors were either dead, missing, or presumed captured. Morale plummeted. Warriors trained from hatching to dominate now whispered in fear about ghosts with human faces. Reports poured in of human units appearing in places they shouldn't be able to reach. No known vehicles, no aircraft, no atmospheric traces. Yet they struck deep behind lines, always disappearing before retaliation could be mounted. At first, Dominion leaders blamed cloaking failures or terrain adaptation. But soon, even that excuse wore thin. The truth was worse. Humans weren't matching the aliens' tactics. They were exceeding them. Human forces stopped reacting. They started predicting. Galtrac's insertion points were sabotaged before warriors even disembarked. Landing zones were covered in corrosive compounds that degraded armor. One entire drop pod was hijacked and crashed into a Dominion supply node. It hadn't been shot down. It had been overridden mid-descent. On the ground, the change was more terrifying. Human units displayed no consistent structure. Some resembled military squads. Others were indistinguishable from civilians until they opened fire. But what united them was speed, precision, ruthlessness. A new pattern emerged. Humans now targeted not just warriors, but support lines. Medics, technicians, signal repeaters. Every time the Dominion adjusted, humans anticipated the move. It wasn't warfare, it was dissection. The Dominion had always relied on technological superiority, but they hadn't expected it to be turned against them. Hacked drones now patrolled Galtrac's airspace, feeding back false visuals. Dominion mechs deployed for suppression went rogue mid-battle, controlled by unseen operators. Their command algorithms were being rewritten in real time. One captured mech, repainted with human insignia, walked into a Galtrac's fortress and detonated a core reactor from within. VA Core ordered full-spectrum audits of every remaining system. By then, it was too late. Human code, simple, elegant, brutal, had spread like infection. Dominion AI began issuing contradictory commands. Friend or foe, identifiers flickered. One squad opened fire on their own unit after a sensor misread. Panic followed. Captured footage from helmet cams revealed a deeper horror. A young Galtrac scout had been taken alive during a failed raid. The humans didn't kill him. They let him escape, after implanting a locator tag beneath his dermal plating. He ran for days through hostile zones, only to lead his own forces into a trap. When he collapsed at his commander's feet, he begged for execution. He'd seen their faces, or worse, he'd seen their eyes and realized something the Dominion had never understood. The humans weren't unified by species or language. They were unified by intent, a cold, burning certainty. They had adapted to a war they hadn't started and didn't want. But now that it had begun, they would finish it without restraint. Dominion Command reviewed, translated human transmissions. Not military orders, not morale boosters, but personal messages, recordings exchanged between fighters across continents. She's gone. I found what was left of the house. I'll bury her when this is over. It took my brother, so I took 3 of them. Still not enough. They think because we cry, we're weak. They're wrong. Those weren't battle plans. They were motivations. The Dominion had no counter for grief turned into fury, for vengeance turned into strategy. For survivors who used pain as fuel, resistance forces began forming coordinated offensives. Underground rail lines became troop networks. Power grids were diverted to run tactical AIs. Scrapyards turned into weapons foundries. Even the remnants of fallen cities were used. Collapsed buildings rigged to funnel invaders into designated death corridors. Dominion surveillance drones captured one such sequence. A squad of Galtrax was herded unknowingly through a controlled path lined with sonic dampeners and visual interference. They entered a collapsed industrial site, expecting resistance. None came. Instead, the floor gave out beneath them, plunging them into a pit lined with sharpened steel and incendiary gel. One survivor, burning, clawed out of the trap only to find a human standing over him with a makeshift flamethrower. The last image transmitted was a single word spray-painted on the wall behind the human. Now you understand. The Dominion attempted to consolidate forces, regroup, and hold what little ground they still occupied. But the humans didn't attack directly. They starved them, cut supply chains, hacked life support systems, sabotaged food stores with biochemical agents tailored to the Galtrax metabolism. Then they waited. Desperation took hold. Warriors refused to patrol. Infighting broke out. Several commanders attempted evacuation requests, but orbital control had been seized. One of the outer defense satellites Dominion made was broadcasting human code. No one knew how. In orbit, High Command debated calling for full withdrawal. VA Corps remained silent until asked. His answer was brief. There is no retreat. Not anymore. We came to hunt. We showed our teeth. They broke them. The final transmission that passed through Dominion lines before blackout was simple, intercepted from a hijacked broadcast station once belonging to a regional human militia. You should have studied us harder. We don't need unity. We don't need mercy. We just need time. And now you've given us all the reason we'll ever need. After that, silence. Then fire. The last remnants of the Galtrax force had retreated into isolated fortresses, desperate to maintain a foothold on Earth. Their perimeter sensors showed nothing. No heat signatures, no motion trails, no electromagnetic disturbances. And yet, every night, another outpost went silent. Entire squads vanished without warning. Their corpses later found arranged in patterns, symbols from human history, language, or mockery. Messages scrawled in ash and oil. You are not welcome here. Go home in pieces. The Dominion had arrived expecting a contest of dominance. They now found themselves in a war of attrition against an enemy they could neither predict nor intimidate. The humans had rewritten the rules of engagement. They no longer fought to defend, they fought to humiliate. And worse, they succeeded. In a final act of defiance, Dominion Command authorized unrestricted engagement protocols. Orbital bombardments, scorched Earth, atmospheric disruption devices, all greenlit. But when the command codes were entered, the satellites failed to respond. The humans had seized orbital control. One of the engineers traced the hijack back to a relay node positioned near South America. It had been constructed from salvaged Dominion tech, duct tape, and concrete slabs. A primitive Frankenstein of machinery, yet powerful enough to cripple the Dominion's most advanced satellite array. Attempts to regain control only triggered a security cascade. Dominion systems locked themselves out. A recorded message played in the command chamber, voice clear, unfiltered, unmistakably human. You're not in control anymore. Panic erupted. The Galtrax had never faced loss at this scale. Loss of superiority, loss of initiative, loss of identity. Their cultural foundation, built on conquest, had met a wall it couldn't scale, resistance without mercy, without surrender, without end. Earth wasn't a battlefield. It was a trap that kept evolving. With orbital firepower neutralized, extraction became the only viable option. But drop zones were compromised. Atmospheric conditions, manipulated through hacked climate systems, scrambled navigation. Earth's biosphere itself was being turned into a weapon. Modified pollen disrupted Galtrac's respiration. Sonic frequencies hidden in city infrastructure triggered disorientation and vomiting. Radiation bursts mimicked their own signal arrays, jamming internal comms. On the ground, humans executed the final phase with chilling precision. Supply convoys were allowed to pass through safe zones, only to be destroyed days later by delayed sabotage. Weapons caches detonated during maintenance. Medical units were contaminated with bacteria designed to mimic familiar nutrients until they attacked the nervous system. VA Corps, once a figure of fear and command, now stood before a fractured leadership. His warriors had aged in weeks. Their armor was rusted, cracked, no longer symbols of power, but reminders of failure. For the first time in generations, the Galtrax did not speak in threats. They whispered in doubt. He watched one final feed. A captured camera, dropped during a failed extraction attempt, showed a group of human fighters gathered around a map. Not military elites. Miners, farmers, mechanics, children, all armed, all focused. No fear in their eyes, just grim resolve. That image said more than any tactical report. These weren't soldiers defending a homeland. These were survivors reshaping it. They weren't just fighting back. They were evolving into something new, something the Galtrax had no classification for. Apex by necessity, predator by decision. The last attempt at a coordinated Dominion assault was crushed before it began. As soon as the mobilization began, the terrain shifted. Roads collapsed. Drones failed mid-flight. Units moved into ambush corridors masked as natural terrain. By the end of the day, 3 out of 5 platoons were gone. The rest were hunted into the forests, their bodies used to bait traps for those who followed. Dominion leadership broadcast one final offer: extraction in exchange for ceasefire. A rare act of surrender, coded carefully to preserve cultural dignity. The humans responded with coordinates. A bluff. The site was rigged. A beacon activated, transmitting Dominion frequencies that attracted every hacked drone in a 300-mile radius. The swarm came. No survivors. Back in orbit, VA Corps made his last transmission to Dominion core space. No honor speech. No blame. Just a brief statement. Do not send more. They are not prey. Then he severed the link. In silence, the few remaining Galtrax ships activated stealth drives and slipped out of orbit, broken and beaten. No ceremony. No songs of glory. Just the shame of underestimating a species that thrived on being underestimated. On Earth, as the final ship disappeared, no celebration followed. No parades. Humanity didn't need to gloat. The scars were deep, the losses countless. But they had earned something far greater than victory. They had taught the galaxy a lesson. Never confuse chaos with weakness. Never mistake empathy for fragility. And above all, never assume that because humanity bleeds, it will break. Sometimes it just sharpens the blade.